No, well, I thought I would have finished this video up within 2 videos. I'm going to have to make a short, hopefully third video to finish this up, to make things clear, because some of these points are really abstruse. But I was making an analogy to the fact that just like a magnet, we have 3 divisible natures of what defines photography, whether it be professional photography or amateur photography. I was making an analogy before about an amateur photographer. He could roll the dice and get a photograph like this, or some other famous photograph. But as is the case, the professional understands what is composition. He understands what is light manipulation. So he is like the guy that works at the casino. He has the key to the slot machine, and he can make the machine spit out what he wants at will. He or she can. So it certainly is the case. I've seen some of the most gorgeous photographs in the world taken by amateurs. Everybody knows this. This is an irrefutable fact. What you want to be is not the guy sitting there sticking quarters in your camera and pulling the lever on the slot machine. You want to be the guy that works at the casino, that knows how, that has the key to the slot machine, is sitting in there manipulating the wheels. You know, life is short and time is short, and maybe these videos are a hair long, but this is a huge, broad topic that I'm actually covering here in a matter of minutes. Even if it amounts to 40 minutes, I mean, it's certainly a lot better than a huge pile of books. As I've said, that there are only 3 types of photographs: prime movers, self-movers, and the universal logos. Now, they can be combinations thereof. They could be both the prime mover and self-mover, or they could be prime mover and universal logos, or they could be prime mover, self-mover, and the universal logos. It could be all 3 of those, like this picture, for example, which I keep pointing back to. But the important thing is that when you have these 3 attributes of beauty that impel movement, either force in motion or acceleration and inertia, you can be a really repulsive photograph of something gruesome. I mean, we see these awful, beheadings and whatnot, and of course they're movers as well. They're prime movers, but they're not inducing you to look in out of respect. I mean, they're repulsive pictures, but they're also prime movers. I mean, these people create these videos and these photographs to make you move. They're not trying to make you fall in love with these, beheadings, for example. They're meant to be prime movers to either scare or frighten you. And some photographers, take pictures like this. I mean, wartime photographers, they want to report the truth, and they show certain things, but every photograph is a lie. As I told you before, this is my wife standing with the family. This family is extremely, not my opinion, every one of her friends, and she's the most innocent person in the world. My wife, a lot older than me, but like I said, we didn't have a physical relationship. I just took care of her instead of having her thrown in a care facility. His family was extremely sadistic. They wouldn't help her out when she was sick and dying. I begged them to fly down when she only had about a week left to live. It's like, no. So it's not like they're poor. They had millions of dollars. They could have flown down and seen her, and they just wouldn't do it. They just didn't give a damn about her anymore. She's never went to jail, never got in trouble with the law, never drank, never smoked, never did drugs, was a perfect little sweetheart her entire life. Not my opinion. It's just an empirical fact. She was, because she didn't marry early and spit out a ton of babies. They kind of wrote her off, which I personally think is sadistic. But anyway, you look at this photograph, you think, well, it's a beautiful family. But, this photograph isn't manipulated, obviously, in Photoshop. It's an old photograph, but it's a self-mover for me because I know the truth behind this photograph and how sadistic and evil these people are. So every photograph is a lie, but every one of those lies is the truth. Whether someone edits something in Photoshop, whether they manipulate you by changing the composition, they can leave out the nasty bits. They could take a picture of a beautiful building, but obviously, frame the picture so that it doesn't show the homeless bums that are sitting around the base of the building. Every photograph is a stinking lie. But they're all the truth, and of course the point is to decipher the truth, and you may not want to decipher the truth. You're just looking at the picture for what it is, and you're not trying to see too deeply into it. Obviously it's the case for most people, but there's more truth, or as much truth, in absence as there is in presence. Photographic astronomy, for example, this is one of the key things. Some astronomers are actually looking millions of light years away, and it's not about what they see, but what they don't see. In what places that they see voids, places where they see absence, they're able to determine a whole lot by what is not present as what is present. What holds true for scientific investigation also holds true for photography. So you have to understand what someone doesn't tell you in the photograph tells you as much about the photograph or the photographer as by what is present. Okay? There's a lot of information missing here. This is not edited, but this is a giant lie, but it is the truth. So that's why I meant, which seems superficially contradictory, that every photograph is a lie, but it is a truth ultimately. Okay? Now you have to think about that one before you start protesting, okay? Think about it more. Now, I don't want to bring up the picture because it's really gruesome, but you can type it in. You can type in execution of a Viet Cong prisoner. Now, the person that did this was a general, and he later opened up a pizza joint in the United States. Type in execution of a Viet Cong prisoner. It's a very famous photograph. You can see him standing in the streets or pointing a revolver at another guy's head, and the shot is taken right before he just wipes the guy out, and people think it's just such a gruesome person, and the shooter was horrible. But the truth of the fact is that the guy that he shot was a mass murderer that made Charles Manson look like Mary Poppins. He killed 34 civilians, and he was, raping and murdering little children. So the guy that was shot was just a horrible. He was like Jeffrey Dahmer and Charles Manson all wrapped into one. Whatever your beliefs are on killing another person, it was an extremely just execution. It was carried out by a general. General was Nguyen Long Lon, which I'm probably pronouncing that long, and he executed another individual. Now, the photographer that actually took this picture is named Adams. He got a Pulitzer Prize for this photograph, but he destroyed the guy's life. The guy that actually shot the evil person was a hero. But the photographer in 1969 won a Pulitzer Prize for that sports photography photograph, and it's as much a famous photograph as this is. But the photographer said, "The general killed the Viet Cong. I killed the general with my camera. Still photographs are the most powerful weapon in the world. People believe them, but photographs do lie, even without manipulation. They are only half-truths." Which, of course, is exactly what I've been telling you. What the photograph didn't say was, what would you do if you were the general at that time in that place on that hot day, and you caught the so-called mass murderer after he blew away 1, 2, 3 American soldiers. He did only that more. He killed tons of innocent civilians, rape and murder of little children. So all people see is this one photograph of this general that has a gun to the head of this horrible, horrible, sadistic, demonic killer. And he executes him. And we do the same thing in the United States, except we stick him in jail, we do lethal injection and whatnot. I don't care what your position is on killing or whether you believe it or not. I mean, that's not the point here. The point here is regarding the photograph. And I'm not going to show you the photograph because people are too queasy these days. They can't handle, reality photographs. So I'd gladly show up, but someone would protest and go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you showed that photograph." You can do a Google search of a Viet Cong prisoner, executing a Viet Cong prisoner. But they destroyed this guy's life. He moved to Virginia, and he opens up a pizza joint, and people eventually figured out who he was, and they made death threats against the guy. But the guy was a hero. The guy purposely went out and hunted down this mass murderer, this horrible, horrible, sadistic mass murderer, and he executed him. The world has different forms of justice, and unlike America, where we take people that are condemned to death and we stick them in a hole for 30, 40 years, and we may or may not eventually execute them, this guy executed this mass murderer on the spot. So he wasn't a bad guy by any rational decision. Whatever you think about execution or capital punishment, I don't care about that. That's about the photograph. But the photographer admitted that he destroyed this guy's life. He said, "The general killed the murderer, but I killed the general with my camera." And that's exactly what he did. He actually destroyed the guy's life. He ruined it. Was he wrong or right in taking the picture? That's not for me to decide, or maybe even for you to decide. It was just simply a capture of reality. But the point is that people see that photograph, but they don't know the truth behind it. Just as anybody would take a look at this photograph and have no idea that this is a sadistic and evil family that took probably one of the most innocent people, imaginable, and, who never did any wrong to anybody in their life, and they just simply wrote her off and, didn't help her out one bit because she didn't marry young and, pop out a half a dozen Rugrats. So you see this picture and you think, well, isn't that a lovely family? It's like, well, no, it's actually a bunch of sadistic piss ants that mistreated a girl because she didn't get married early and pop out a dozen Rugrats, but you know, that's not the story. That's, you know, nobody can deduce that's the truth from that. But that photograph is the truth. You know, it's ultimately the truth if you know the whole truth behind the photograph. I mean, she was abused, and you know, she was sadistically abused by this guy, and she probably wrote off other guys. I mean, it looks like a testosterone-filled jarhead. I mean, some sort of lunkhead that thinks that women need to be slapped around and, I don't know, cook in the kitchen. I mean, who knows what sort of sadistic scumbag he was. I mean, that's what she told me. And so, rightly so, she, you know, wrote off men for her entire life, and she became someone dedicated to helping people and working in a hospital. So, but, you know, that's the whole point. You know, every photograph is a lie, but there's much truth in what is not present as there what is in what is present. Now, as whether you can determine what that truth is, you know, that's another matter. Maybe you don't care. But all photographs irreducibly fall into one of three categories, and or a combination thereof, and this is irrefutable. You can take this to your photography school and ask them the question, but it is the case that all pictures are either a prime mover, or they're a self-mover, or they embody a universal logos, or they're a combination thereof. But when they're a combination thereof, especially in a strong sense of all three, then you don't end up, as I've stated already, you don't end up with the totality of three. You end up with a multiplicative of those three, which is far, far greater than three. And that's why National Geographic, for example, spent enormous time and money making a video and hunting this woman down in every little crack and nook of Afghanistan to see if she was still alive, and they eventually found her. They made a video series about it. But the point of this is this is the philosophy of photography. This is something that the ancient Greek Platonists understood. They understood what incommensurability was. I'm sorry I had to bring out a magnet analogy to you, but it's the same thing is true in professional photography. When you say, like, well, there's some ineffable quality other than the beauty and the haunting eyes, what is it in this photograph that is non-quantifiable, which would be that multiplicative factor. Since this photograph rates a 10 out of 10, basically, according to most consensus, it only has a factor of 1, 2, and 3, so why does it rate a 10? And that's that incommensurate multiplicative factor that is ineffable. And that is the incommensurability. The Greeks defined it as the aoristos, or the tolma, or ananke. It's the ananke, the tolma, rather hard Greek terms to define, but it's that the aoristos dias, the indefinable, which literally means aharismos, means without a horizon, means it has no definition. There's nothing you can point to. And I hate to bring up this magnet analogy again, but the same thing we see in a magnet, you can point to it, but it's not there. You can see it, you know, what you think is there is not actually there. So if you're able to cut this magnet perfectly in half, you would never, you know, separate out the North Pole and the South Pole. It is incommensurate. It is everywhere at every point along this magnet, but it is non-specific unless as a whole. That is why this picture as a whole has that incommensurability as the totality of what it is, but you can't cut out what it is. It's like, what is it that makes this a 10? Together it's only 3, 1, 2, and 3, so what makes this a 10? It is ineffable. It is incommensurate. The Greek philosophy of aesthetics defined this very rationally a long, long time ago. Damascius, Plotinus, Numinus, Albinus, a little bit of Aristotle. Aristotle wasn't that wise. Plato and the Pythagoreans were. But they defined this a long time ago. And this is that ineffable quality of this photograph that people are unable to understand, or of any professional photograph that people, I can't put my finger on it. This photograph is awesome, but I don't know what it is that makes it so awesome. And it is that incommensurate factor, which is the universal logos, which makes up the nature of why this is such an incredible photograph. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later, okay? That was the philosophy of photography in a nutshell. And I mean a really small nutshell. Even though it was only 3 videos, it was still a small nutshell.